What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for the first Ask Me Anything episode of the 2025 NHL playoffs. The first round has been insane so far. We have a lot to talk about. As always, you guys killed it with the questions. Even if your question isn't featured in this episode, just know I read every single one, and I appreciate all of you guys. And if this is your first time checking out the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We just recently hit 82,000, so thank you guys for that. And with that all being said, let's go ahead and start the episode off with the first question from Rocket Man, who says, now that the whole Nikian situation is thankfully ironed out, should the Canes try giving him some ice time with a 3-1 series lead? If so, who should come out of the lineup? Since they have a bit of a cushion in the series, I wouldn't be surprised if the Canes want to get Nikian into a game, but when you look at their decor, it's hard to imagine any one of Slavin, Burns, Orlov, Chatfield, Ghost, or Walker coming out of the lineup. They could always go 11-7, which would probably make it a lot easier to ease Nikian into things, but ultimately, if I had to make a prediction, I don't think he plays in the first round. If Carolina is able to close things out in Game 5, they would have a pretty extended break before the second round starts, which would be really beneficial for a guy like Nikian to get in a lot of practices, learn the systems, and really get acclimated to the team, and then be ready to go for if Carolina needs him in round 2. In the end, I do think we will see Nikian in the playoffs at some points. Injuries can always happen. Maybe someone on that blue line has a rough couple of games and they want to shake things up. I honestly feel like Carolina would be doing themselves a disservice if they don't at least give Nikian a look in the playoffs at some point. Some people view Nikian as the best prospect in all of hockey. Obviously, the NHL playoffs are a different beast from the regular season, and I can't imagine it would be easy to make your debut in the postseason, but it's not like Nikian is an 18 or 19-year-old kid. The dude's 23 years old. He's big, has a physical element to his game. I don't think he's going to get bullied out there. He was the highest scoring defenseman in the KHL in 2 out of the last 3 seasons. Nikian looks like the real deal and could be a real difference maker for the Hurricanes, so I do think they're going to give him a look at some point, but I just don't think it's going to come in this first round series against the New Jersey Devils because, let's be honest, the Hurricanes have looked really good. The decor is fully healthy. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. They might as well just try and close out this series with the same guys that have gotten them to this position that they're in with a 3-1 lead. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Zora Plus, who says, if you were a Jets fan, how worried would you be? Hellebuck was abysmal in games 3 and 4, and now the series is tied up. I'll be honest, if I was a Jets fan, the doubt would probably be starting to creep in a little bit. Even as somebody who took the Jets to win the Stanley Cup on their bracket, I'm already second guessing that pick. Now, I don't think it's time to hit the panic button just yet. At the end of the day, the series is still tied. The Jets still have home ice advantage, but the pressure is definitely on the Jets more so than it is on the Blues heading into Game 5. It's not like the Jets just lost Game 3 and 4 in St. Louis. They got their asses kicked. Connor Hellebuck was pulled in both games. Playoff Hellebuck continues to be a massive story. I think MoneyPuck.com has his goal saved above expected through 4 games at over -7, which is honestly kind of hard to believe considering the regular season this guy had. All season long, Hellebuck was basically unbeatable. He's going to win the Vezina Trophy. He very well may end up winning the Hart Trophy as league's MVP, but for whatever reason, in the playoffs, Connor Hellebuck not only struggles to replicate his regular season performance, he struggles to even just be solid. And the biggest reason why I would probably be a little bit concerned right now if I was a Jets fan is because it's not like this year is the first time we've seen Connor Hellebuck struggle in the playoffs. The last 2 postseasons before this one, he struggled as well. And if you're the Jets, there's not really much you can do. You're not starting Eric Comrie in Game 5. You kind of just have to ride it out with Connor Hellebuck, have trust and have faith in him, in his ability to bounce back after 2 brutal performances in St. Louis. There's no doubt about it though, the room for error is really gone. This series is now a best 2 out of 3. The Jets really can't even afford one more lackluster performance from Connor Hellebuck in this series, or they're likely going home, so he needs to lock in. And I don't want to put all the blame on Connor Hellebuck because the Jets defense in games 3 and 4 in St. Louis was not good either, but at the end of the day, Hellebuck is this team's MVP, and if they want to go deep in the playoffs this year, he's got to start playing like it. The next question we have comes from Ahu Man, who says, your thoughts on no suspension for Kachchuck, especially in comparison to Hagel's hit? This has been a very hot topic of discussion on social media since Game 3. The similarities in the hits are obviously there. Both were blatantly interference. Both were called 5-minute majors, but the situations were definitely different different. Barkov never had the puck in that sequence when he was hit by Brandon Hagel, whereas Gensel had the puck, made a pass, and was just hit very late by Matthew Kachchuck. There was also a bit of head contact in Hagel's hit on Barkov. I don't think it was a full-blown headshot by any means, but there definitely was a bit of head contact, whereas there wasn't really any head contact when Kachchuck hit Gensel. I'm not trying to defend Kachchuck here. I still think it was a dirty hit at the end of the day. I'm just trying to explain what I think the NHL's thought process probably was as to why one was a suspension and one wasn't. That being said, I do still think Kachchuck should have gotten a suspension. I'm going to show a tweet on screen here from Sports with JT on Twitter. The tweet says, "I agree the hits are not the same. Hagel's hit was more violent. Barkov never had the puck, etc. But the big difference to me is that Hagel is trying to make a hockey play in a 1-0 game and misjudges and makes a mistake. Kachchuck is headhunting in a game that's over." And honestly, I kind of agree with that take. Like, the game was over when Kachchuck made that hit on Jake Gensel. It was a predatory hit. Even though he didn't make contact with his head, it was still dirty. So that's where I stand on the whole thing. I do think at the very least, Kachchuck should have gotten one game like Hagel did. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Ryan McKay, who says, "What team has surprised you the most in the playoffs so far with how good/bad they are?" For me, I definitely have to go with the Minnesota Wild. I didn't really give them much of a chance coming into this first round matchup against Vegas. In my bracket predictions video, I said that I just didn't think Minnesota had the kind of depth to be able to match up with a team like Vegas, who is very deep. All four lines can score. But one thing that I think is already very clear is when I was making my predictions for this series, I think I really underrated Minnesota's defense. They have completely neutralized Jack Eichel and Mark Stone so far in this series. Both of those guys have just one assist each, whereas the superstar forwards on the Minnesota Wild, like Matt Boldy and Kirill Kaprizov, are popping off and basically getting whatever they want out there. They are dominating. Another big story in this series is Adin Hill is being outplayed by Philip Gustafsson significantly. Again, I didn't really give Minnesota much of a chance heading into this series, and now it feels like Vegas is fortunate for this series to be tied at 2 and that they are not down 3-1. In Game 4, Minnesota had the lead heading into the third period, but ended up losing in overtime. If Vegas is going to win this series, they're definitely going to need some guys to step up, most notably Stone, Eichel, and Adin Hill. The next question we have comes from Ryan PM, who says, "Are the Kings going to blow it by giving the Oilers life by losing both in Edmonton? They dominated both games at home and laid a giant egg in Game 3 and blew it in Game 4. Yeah, I mean, giving this Oilers team life after how the first 2 games in LA went is obviously the last thing the Kings wanted to do, but that is exactly what they did. Just like how I said earlier in the video, if I was a Jets fan, the doubt would probably be starting to creep in a little bit. Well, I'm going to say the same thing here. If I was a Kings fan, the doubt would definitely be creeping in. The Kings had a chance to go into Edmonton and really put a stranglehold on this series just by winning one game on the road, and it looked like they were going to do that last night. In Game 4, the Kings were in full control, up 3-1 heading into the third period, and then in the third, it kind of just felt like the LA Kings stopped trying to play to win, and they were just playing to not lose and to not blow the lead. Their forecheck in the third period just wasn't there like it was in the first 2 periods. They just in general stopped playing with intensity in the offensive zone. They were on their heels for basically the entire third period, and anytime you play that way against the Edmonton Oilers, I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. And of course, the Oilers ended up scoring 2 goals in the third period, tying things up, and they had all the momentum in their favor heading into overtime, and it definitely carried into overtime because that was one of the more lopsided overtime periods that I remember in recent memory in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, Darcy Kemper stood on his head in that overtime period for as long as he could, but it just felt inevitable that the Oilers were going to win that game, and they did. And now for a team in the LA Kings who have lost in the first round to the Oilers in the last 3 playoffs, it really feels like all of the pressure is on them to protect home ice and win Game 5, when realistically this series should be 3-1 and the Kings should be going back to LA for Game 5 with a chance to close out the series. Obviously got to give credit where credit is due though to the Edmonton Oilers for that comeback last night. The Evan Bouchard experience was on full display. He had that misplay which led to the Kings going up 3-1, and when that happened, man, was he ever getting ripped apart on social media. And then just like that in the third period, he scores not once but twice to tie things up for the Oilers. And when he scored that slap shot to tie things up with the goal he pulled, I tweeted out, that's why you just got to live with the defensive mistakes that he may make sometimes, because he's just such a ridiculous offensive talent. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Northeast Michigan, who says, reverse sweep in Ottawa. Because it's the Leafs, it definitely feels like this is possible. And let's be honest, it's not like Toronto has completely dominated this series, despite the fact that they are up 3-1. It feels like Ottawa could just as easily be up 3-1. I mean, 2 of the 3 games that Toronto has won so far have been in overtime. If they aren't able to close this thing out in Game 5 on home ice, I do think you're going to see a lot of panic within the Leafs fan base, and rightfully so. I mean, for once, this core needs to show that killer instinct in the playoffs and close this series out in Game 5 on home ice before things start to spiral. You cannot give this Senators team an opportunity to go back to Ottawa for Game 6 and have a chance to tie this series. And now finally, finishing up this episode with a question from Hatcher Kane, who says, how many Game 7s do you think we'll see in the first round? I mean, right now it feels like we could see at least 3 or 4 Game 7s, which would be unreal considering we only had, 2 last year in the first round? Right now, all 4 first-round matchups in the Western Conference are knotted up at 2. I wouldn't be surprised if all of those series go 7 games. We just talked about the Leafs in Ottawa. I mean, considering the Leafs' history in the playoffs, would anyone be surprised if that one ends up going 7? I also think Tampa Bay and Florida still has a really good chance to go 7 games. In my opinion, this has already been one of the more exciting first rounds of the playoffs in recent memory, and if we get 4 or 5 Game 7s, I mean, we could be looking at an all-time great first round. So that is going to wrap up the first Ask Me Anything episode of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, huge shout out and thank you to each and every one of you who sent in a question. Even if your question wasn't featured in this episode, just know I read them all and I appreciate all of you guys. If you made it all this way to the end of the video and you ended up enjoying yourself and you want to see another episode next week, be sure to leave a like. It's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does help out the videos a ton. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.